I finished Blasphemous 1, and while playing it, I had a blast of a time. I think the art style was amazing, the music was great too, the combat felt fresh and fast, and the bosses I really enjoyed as well. And then it came time to beat Blasphemous 2, and while playing it, it had a lot of new stuff, a lot of cool ideas, and a better art style, you could say, and improved at least visually. Music was great as well. They had new ideas like having multiple weapons and then having certain reasons to use them to traverse the map, and they improved the combat a lot. But while playing it, I realized that I didn't enjoy Blasphemous 2 as much as Blasphemous 1, even though Blasphemous 2 had a lot of improvements to it. And that kind of got me thinking, why is it so hard to make a sequel to a good game? And I came to a conclusion that there's three main reasons, in my opinion, that make it so difficult. First of all, we have expectations. Secondly, innovation. And thirdly, greed. Now, because expectation and innovation kind of go hand in hand, I'm gonna talk about them both at the same time. First of all, expectation. When you have a great product in a game, most of the time, a lot of people have really high expectations for a sequel. Usually it comes to them wanting more than you can provide. For example, GTA 6 right now, you could say it has such a high expectations that it's basically impossible to achieve them. And this makes a game that usually is gonna have a good sequel. That sequel suffers because people have too high of expectations, or maybe because of the fault of the advertisement, they think the game is gonna be different from what it actually is. And the same goes with innovation, as because when a game announces a sequel, you have to at least branch out and innovate on already built game, or at least make it a difference. Something like, for example, Resident Evil, where you go maybe from Resident Evil 3, which is more survival, to a more action type game. And why these both innovation expectations kind of go hand in hand is because even though you do need to at the same time innovate to have a sequel that is good and interesting and fresh. At the same time, if your innovation goes into direction that is contradictory to what audience expects the game to be, you're gonna suffer. For example, again, Resident Evil 5 and 6. These two games go into direction of action, and even though Resident Evil 4 and 5 were good games fundamentally and people still enjoy them because they're fresh and different, finally when we got to Resident Evil 6, people realize that this is not the direction they want this game and series and genre to go. And it was a really bad release, even though it was still kind of innovating on things and trying to go into a different direction compared to the first three. Just wanted to add that Monster Hunter Worlds, for example, was a really huge success for the Monster Hunter community and the game and franchise in general. It was a huge success. And while supposed to be that sequel, that successor to Monster Hunter Worlds. But again, people expected so much content, so much more content, and maybe expected a more difficult experience that the game just didn't deliver and fell off greatly after the initial release hype. And yes, I understand the performance is the biggest reason for the fall off. It's really badly optimized, but you cannot deny that people's expectations, which is the fault of the developers for not stopping those expectations, massively impacted how the game performed after its release. This to me felt the same way, even though I know that not everybody is gonna feel the same way as I do. But for example, when I played Blasphemous 1 and 2, 2 had a lot of innovations, like these cool new weapons and using those types of weapons to overcome certain terrains, to access new areas, and be able to fight new bosses. But the simplicity of Blasphemous 1 I liked more, and even you could say the pixel art I liked it more in the Blasphemous one. So even though they are technically innovations that you need to make the game better and feel fresher, sometimes people's expectations want a similar thing that they just played. So it's kind of a hard thing to juggle with one thing being people expecting you to have a great product and at the same time expecting a certain product, and you needing to innovate, be able to accomplish these expectations and go into direction that people want. That's why I think a lot of companies should be peop, asking for people's feedback, because it is important to create a good not just a sequel but a game and a remake. Now I'm gonna move on to the final issue why most games these days kind of have bad sequels, which is greed. And why did I separate it from the two is because often when a company wants to make a good game, they sometimes will deliver the game below expectations, or don't play too safe and don't have enough innovation. But at least these companies try to make a good product. Whereas there are some companies that have just greedy executives that want the money, they want the popularity, they wanna, and because of that, they say this game that maybe doesn't need a sequel, or the sequel isn't really ready and doesn't have the legs to be produced. They say, let's do it, make me a sequel, and that sequel bombs. And some of these sequels are so bad they kind of ruin a bit the original game because of how bad it is. The biggest example that I can come up with is Ubisoft with their latest Assassin's Creed game, which honestly shows what is the biggest problem with making a sequel just for the greed. And you could say that Ubisoft is making this sequel not because of greed, but because this is probably the only franchise that still makes the money and they kind of need to continue it. But basically, Assassin's Creed was a game, used to be a game about stealth, using your positioning, hiding behind bushes, tactically killing a person or a target without anyone noticing. Basically, Hitman, you could say. But now, because they just need a sequel and as many people to play the game, they made it into a open world. You could choose stealth or brute force everything, and basically because of greed, these sequels to Assassin's Creed became that it's no longer Assassin's Creed. It's just some kind of just another open world game. So if you just because of greed and want to capitalize on the popularity of IP, make a sequel or a game that doesn't need a sequel, you're always gonna fail unless people who are working on it gonna become gods and create one of the best experiences ever, even if it's unnecessary. Now, I kind of yapped about what, in my opinion, makes a sequel more difficult to create than the actual game, than the original game, or why is it so difficult when the game pops off to make a sequel for it. But I literally have a thumbnail that's basically about Blasphemous. So I need to talk about both of these games. So I'm gonna say much, not gonna say much, but Blasphemous one of the best 2D, you could say, action platformers, and I think it kind of introduced me to the genre. I'm probably gonna do Soul Knight and Nine Souls, these kind of games. Now that I got introduced into this genre, but I will say there's a reason I made this video with the sequels is because, in my opinion, I think Blasphemous 1, it's really good. I don't want to add anything else to it. And Blasphemous 2 actually improves a lot of the things and makes the combat more refreshing, more unique, more, even you could say, fast. And they made platforming more interesting. They added a lot of new ways you can walk through the terrain. But because I kind of already for Blasphemous 1 had good expectations, for high expectations, and my expectations were a little bit different from what I got, I will say that I probably enjoyed Blasphemous 1 more. And for the sake of it, I'm gonna give ratings for both of the games. For Blasphemous 1, I'm gonna give it a 10 out of 10. Not objectively, subjectively. That's just how much I enjoyed the game. And for Blasphemous 2, I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10. I think this game is amazing as well, but not as good as the first one. So, We'll see how this dumpster fire of a video turned out. Hopefully, it's at least watchable, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.